Greetings and salutations, young true believers. So, for today, we're talking about John Elster's The Market and the Forum, Three Varieties of Political Theory. Uh, Very briefly, what Elster's up to in this article is he's comparing, um, he's drawing analogies between the benefits of the political sphere and the benefits of economics, right? And he's asking, political theory have should political practice, right, have benefits akin to economic benefits for the public, right? So, really quickly, just off the uh, top of my head, the editors of your text kind of do you a bit of a disservice because they talk extensively about Pareto optimal economics, and they don't bother to put a footnote or an endnote that tells you exactly what Pareto optimal economics is. So I'm going to define that for you really quickly. Pareto optimal economics relates to or denotes a distribution of wealth such that any redistribution or other change beneficial to one individual is detrimental to one or more others. An economy is said to be in a Pareto optimum state when no economic changes can make one individual better off without making at least one other individual worse off. So that's what he's talking about with this Pareto optimal stuff, right? All right. So what are the three views concerning the relationship between economics and politics? What Elster also refers to as the market and the forum. Well, the first one is what he calls the economic theory of democracy, and he attributes this to a 1930s political theorist named Schumpeter, right? It's a market theory of politics in the sense that the act of voting is a private act similar to that of buying and selling. But he being Elster has serious criticisms of this view, right? The very distinction between the secret and the open ballot shows that there is room for a private-public distinction within politics. The economic theory of democracy, therefore, rests on the idea that the forum should be like the market in its purpose as well as in its mode of functioning. By that he means satisfying private desires, right? The purpose is defined in economic terms, the purpose of politics, that is, right? And the mode of functioning is like that of aggregating individual decisions, right? Again, Elster doesn't like this view because it tries to separate, right, the economic and the political, two separate realms devoted to satisfaction of private desires. And ultimately, for his part, Elster doesn't think that either politics or economics is about that, right? So what's the second view? There's a view that the forum, that is to say, again, the public sphere, should be completely divorced from the market in purpose as well as in institutional management. The forum should be more than a distributive totality of individuals queuing up, that is to say, lining up for the election booth. Citizenship is a quality that can only be realized in public, that is, in a collective joined for a common purpose. Now, Elster, he notes, right, throughout, or at the beginning of this section, right, this is section 2, that he's sympathetic to this view, right? He tells us, this is page 121, I am, in fact, largely in sympathy with the fundamental tenets of this view, yet fear that it might be dismissed as utopian. Again, utopia referring to an ideal society that presumably can't be realized, right? Both in the sense of ignoring the problem of getting from here to there and in the sense of neglecting some elementary facts of human psychology. So he has 7 objections. We'll run through those really briefly. The first objection to this view involves a reconsideration of the issues of paternalism. What's paternalism? Paternalism is a doctrine in ethics and law that the state knows better than you what's in your best interest. So, this might sound, terrifying at first blush, but there are many paternalistic laws in place in American society. Seatbelt laws, motorcycle helmet laws, anti-prostitution laws, right? So our society is rife with paternalistic laws. He goes on to ask, would it not in fact be unwarranted interference to impose on the citizens the obligations to participate in political discussion? Well, we know Americans in general we don't like to vote all that much, right? I mean, many of us do, but by the same token, many of us disdain the political process, arguing cynically that the politicians are all the same, right? Um, let's see. The second objection is that even assuming unlimited time for discussion, unanimous and rational agreement might not necessarily ensue. Well, we see that to in fact be the case, right? And he ties that into his third objection, right? Since there are in fact always time constraints on discussions, often the stronger, the more important the issue, unanimity will rarely emerge. And that's true. We see that with healthcare, with debates about healthcare. We see that with debates about immigration policy and economic policy. Going on to objection 4, which we can find, where is objection 4? Here we go. The fourth objection questions the validity of the reply that in an ideal speech situation, right, if it could be realized, it will nevertheless improve the outcome of the political process if one goes some way toward it. So if we could ever get to a situation where people, in short, say what they mean without the pressures of conforming to society or rocking the boat or perhaps, again, if they could say what they mean with full knowledge, not partial knowledge, not ignorance, not bias, but in genuine situations in which everybody really legitimately knew what they were talking about, right? So he goes on to note, in some cases, a little discussion can be a dangerous thing. Again, this is bottom of 121. Worse, in fact, than no discussion at all, if it makes some, but not all persons align themselves on the common good, right? And that's where he relays the story about the two boys who find a cake, and the one boy says, okay, well, I'm going to take all of it. And the other boy says, well, hold on, we both found it, so I'm entitled to half. And a stranger walks up and said, you guys should reach a compromise. The first boy should get 3/5, right? Again, a little ignorance, right, or a little knowledge, as the case may be, can be a very dangerous thing. A fifth objection to this theory is to question the implicit assumption that the body politic as a whole is better or wiser than the sum of its parts. Could it not rather be the case that people are made more, not less, selfish and irrational by interacting politically? This is a tough objection, right? And the events of the past 6 months have kind of really borne this out, the extent to which politics leads people to embrace conspiracy theories and just behave in all manner of irrational ways because they really believe they're advancing the public good. Kind of bears out Elster's fifth objection here. A sixth objection, this is 122 on the right-hand side, is that unanimity, were it to be realized, might easily be due to conformity rather than its rational agreement. And here, he talks a lot about the cognitive biases. The cognitive bias, gang, is an unconscious psychological tendency that distorts, disrupts, or otherwise alters rational belief formation. And there are many of these, right? He talks about the bandwagon effect at one point, which is a cognitive bias that tends us to make us align our thoughts with the majority. He talks about, what's another cognitive bias he mentions in this article? I can't find it now, but if you take a critical thinking class, or if you have taken a critical thinking class, you're definitely aware of the effects of the cognitive biases. There are many of these. Confirmation bias, which tends to lead us to seek out sources of information that confirm what we're already inclined to believe. There's negativity bias, which makes us place more emphasis on bad news than on good news. There's the availability heuristic, which leads us to believe that something is more common or prevalent than it is based upon how often we hear about it, right? So beware of the cognitive biases and their effects on us when we're talking about politics and just, well, truly anything social. My seventh objection, bottom of 122, top of 123, amounts to a denial of the view that the need to couch one's arguments in terms of the common good will purge the desires of all selfish arguments. That's a really good point, right? the assumption often among political theorists is that the more we talk about the public good, the more it will drive out the proverbial demon of self-interest when we're talking about politics. And Elster, again, rightly, there might be good reason for doubting that. So here's the top page 127. He wraps it up. In between these extremes is the view that I find most attractive. One can argue that the form, that he uses the term form as analogous to public sphere, should differ. One can argue that the form should differ from the market in its mode of functioning, yet be concerned with decisions that ultimately deal with economic matters. And indeed, we see that to be the case in our own practice, our own democratic practice in the United States, right? Even higher order political decisions concern lower level rules that are directly related to economic matters. Hence, constitutional arguments about how laws can be made and changed constantly invoke the impact of legal stability and change on economic affairs. It is a concern with substantive decisions that lends the urgency to political debates, right? So, again, to say that the two spheres, the economic, the political, are separate and never the twain shall meet is, on Elster's view, just nonsensical, because they clearly do affect one another, right? He goes on. He wraps up this article with the following observation: the ever-present constraint of time creates a need for focus and concentration that cannot be assimilated to the leisurely style of political argument, in which it may be better to travel hopefully than to arrive. We philosophers like to we debate, right? And we don't come to conclusions, but that's not obviously what we can do or what we can afford to do with respect to politics, right? Yet within these constraints, arguments form the core of the political process. If thus defined as public in nature and instrumental in purpose, instrumental meaning a means to an end, right? Politics assumes what I believe to be its proper place in society.